everyone, and welcome to another Scots Way Hey podcast. And today we're talking all about the Village Storytelling Festival. And I'm joined by Emma Collins, who is the creative producer of the festival. Hello, Emma.
Hello.
And we've also got some other people who are involved, Raymond Wilson, Daiva Ivanuskaite, and Shona Cowie, and we'll hear more from them either. But hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello there.
So first of all, Emma, I think it'd be good if you could give us an overview of the Village Storytelling, not just the festival, but the centre that you're involved with as well.
So the Village Storytelling Centre is based out in Pollock in Glasgow, and it was founded in the year 2000. So it's been running for more than 20 years now, and it started out mainly serving that community and working with people in the community to give them an arts centre, because there was very little at that point out in Pollock. So it's been doing that for some time, and the village works with communities across Glasgow and beyond Glasgow now, and it uses storytelling as a way to support people to work through different things, but also as a creative activity that people can take part in, and people love it. The other side of the village is that it works to promote the storytelling as an art form, as a theatrical pursuit, and it can take many different forms. And that's really where the festival has come from. So I, in 2016, when I worked for the village, founded the festival, and it ran for 2 years then. And then it took a little hiatus, with the COVID pandemic and so on, but now it's the year of Scotland's stories, and they very kindly invited me to come back and create a festival for them this year. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind the festival really is that it looks at storytelling in a kind of broad sense, and it looks at storytelling as a traditional art form, but it places that on the contemporary stage. And it also really embraces the idea that storytelling is one of our oldest and most democratic art forms. Everybody's a storyteller. You know, you're a storyteller standing at the bus stop in the morning, and you're a storyteller on the stage at the CCA. And the groups that the village works with, the different communities that they work with, are also storytellers. So we place their stories and the performances that they create on an equal footing with the professionals that we bring from across the UK and indeed from across Europe to perform at the festival. So it has these wonderful performances by international storytellers and by our community groups, and then it also has a range of other aspects around it, like some workshops and family events, and an exhibition which will be held out at Salt Space, which is a cooperative gallery out in the Merchant City.
Fantastic. And that's the thing, isn't it? It is across the city. You've got various venues that you're going to be at.
Yeah, so our main venue is the CCA up in Suckyhall Street, and then we'll also have our exhibition out in the High Street in Salt Space, and we'll then also be back out in Pollock for a family mini festival on the Sunday to close off the festival and make sure that our own communities are really as fully involved as they can be. And we're also reaching out with an online programme this year, so hopefully we'll have people attending from across the world, potentially.
That's interesting, because that seems to be almost the future of festivals, the things that people have found, you know, obviously with lockdown they couldn't get out, but festivals still, some of them still went ahead, and you had this online aspect, and this kind of hybrid that I think you're going to get from now on is very much interesting and gives you potentially such a bigger audience.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's really important for a lot of reasons to keep doing that, even though now you could, you know, there's nothing like being in the room with everybody and getting back out to live events. And I think we're all really excited about that. But we want to still include the people who maybe can't get out to those live events, either because they're geographically not near us, or because they have other difficulties in attending a theatre event, be that childcare or any other thing that might form a barrier to actually attending theatre performances. And I think one of the things that's come out of the pandemic is we've become more inclusive in that way, and we want to make sure that we keep that inclusivity and diversity in the people who can come and see the work that we're going to be putting on.
And you say this is the first time it's been on since 2017. Is it much bigger for yourself? Is it kind of expanded since then?
It certainly feels bigger. I mean, I think we had something like 40 events. We have people coming from 6 different countries. We have brand new work that I'm sure Raymond will tell you about. He's one of our new commissions. And we have people who are contributing to the online workshops from their own countries rather than being with us. It feels like a really comprehensive, exciting programme. I mean, it's brilliant to be involved with.
And so how difficult is it to program something like this? It must be such an undertaking where do you begin? Do you go with people that you know and trust and then work from there? Or what's the process?
Well, I think that we're really lucky in Scotland and in the UK to have such a wealth of amazing storytellers that we can draw and bring into the festival. We've as I said, been fortunate enough to run this twice before, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't just bringing people that we'd already worked with. So what we've really tried to do is reach out across the spectrum of people who are doing different kinds of storytelling in Scotland and in the rest of the UK. And also we'll hopefully be having people from the Netherlands coming over to perform as well. A lot of the work is going to be performed at the festival for the first time, right. And a lot of it's going to be if it's not brand new work, it's going to be the first time that it's been performed in Scotland. So we're really, really lucky to be able to be showcasing a whole number of brand new shows, including work that we've commissioned, but also people that we know that have had work in development that we're able to provide a platform for. And yeah, it's a huge jigsaw. I mean, it's been so much fun. I feel so lucky to do this kind of job, but certainly being so spoilt for choice with all the amazing people that could come, it's been hard to narrow it down to get the program that we have now. But I think it's going to be brilliant.
It certainly sounds exciting, and looking through it, really kind of varied as well. Raymond, can you tell us a bit about not only what you're going to be doing, but how you get involved with the festival in the first place as well?
Yeah, so, I mean, I applied, proposed my show to the festival through a listing on Creative Scotland. And yeah, it was quite like a streamlined, easy kind of proposal application process. And basically just pitched the idea, and from there it gets sent to these guys, and they picked it up to be commissioned. So my show is called I Hope Your Flowers Bloom. It's going to be on the last night of the festival, on the 9th, on Saturday the 9th, at the CCA. And basically it's an entirely new work. As I said, they commissioned it. So as soon as I kind of got the go ahead for that, I started writing that and making that. And it's a show about a working class man who essentially uses a relationship with somebody to try and escape their environment. And because they get brought out by this person into nature and sort of Scottish outdoors. And it's about, kind of goes between this pair of friends and their relationship growing as they go out on these day trips, but also these kind of descriptions of the Scottish outdoors. Yeah, and it's just been a whole process writing this. I mean, this is my sort of debut storytelling show. So I've done, I mean, I'm a performer, that's my background, and I trained as an actor. But I mean, just with the pandemic, I got a lot more. I just did writing more because I was inside, and I was like, well, I can't sit and wait about for auditions and theatres to open and stuff. And so I've always done little bits of poetry and short stories and things like that. And I've kind of leaned a bit more heavily into making my own work because of the agency and that, really. And so this whole kind of process has just been me writing the work and figuring out the differences between making a bit of theatre to actually making a story that I will tell on stage, you know. But it's certainly been a learning curve and an interesting one as well.
It's so interesting looking at all three of your the projects that you're working on. It shows you that there's limitless ways, I suppose, of telling stories, or at least it shouldn't be restricted in any way, and that's what comes across. And what you've just said has got me thinking about the situation during lockdown, where a lot of people went to writing. I think particularly creative folk, they maybe wrote more, But that idea of telling stories, that seems to be more of a kind of communal thing. You know, you might do it in the pub, or you do it on the bus stop, or wherever you might meet people. And that was kind of, I suppose you could do it over Zoom, but, you know, it was limited in that way. So you've maybe got a lot of people out there that have these stories that they're itching to tell, and they've not had a platform to do it yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going from this model of sort of classical way of, you know, a guy sitting in a room writing by himself, to try to move that into a more collaborative person-to-person way of making art. And I guess that's something the Village Storytelling Centre is all about, of this kind of communal way of making art, rather than just that model of somebody sitting in the room by themselves. And that transition is interesting.
Before we talk to Daiva, Emma, this idea of what constitutes storytelling is interesting as well, because, as I say, you shouldn't restrict it in any way, but a lot of people will think, I know what performance poetry is, I know what a gig is, a live music gig, I know what theatre is, a one-man show or a one-woman show, or whatever it might be. But storytelling, maybe what does that mean in terms of going to see it?
So, well, I think that people can debate this endlessly, and I would say that there's probably lots of different ways of being a storyteller and telling stories. But I suppose what they might find slightly different than a theatrical show is that it's often more about you and the storyteller, you as the audience and the storyteller interacting. So you feel like you're being told a story by an individual rather than the individual is pretending to be a character. So it's less about a sort of dramatic inhabiting of a character, let's say, as you might have in theatre, and more about you, Alistair, and me, Emma, we're together and I'm talking to you and I'm telling you that story. There's still, like, you know, there's spectacular elements. One of our shows has got an aerial performance involved in it. There's also music that is set, but at the core of it, there's that kind of interaction between the person telling the story and the audience listening to the story, and how they kind of have an experience together, if you like.
It seems to me it's a very expansive and welcoming rather than limiting term. You know, you get lots of people could come with various ideas and do it, which actually brings us, Daiva, to your involvement with connecting storytelling in the early years in a post-lockdown world, which is a fascinating title in itself. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So the project Connecting Stories was conceived by amazing storyteller Sarah Rankin, and she invited me to be part of the project, and together to tell stories to the babies and toddlers, and also work together with the parents. And a filmmaker, Andy Gunn, was also a part of this project. So he filmed our weekly sessions, and we will see a short film made by him during the festival. So the Connecting Stories project explores the experience of parents, what was like to welcome the baby during the lockdown, when visits to the hospitals were limited, when husbands partners had to wait outside during the scans and were welcome only to the active part of birthing. And what was it like to be alone at home without any baby groups, any baby showers, no grannies, granddads around. So it's a huge, I think, a huge experience parents went through. And me, I also am this kind of parent, because in 2020, my daughter, Alma, was born. So I know personally what it's like to be a parent during that time.
Because I suppose children, hopefully, often get different stories from different people as they're developing. You know, as you say, you pass to the granny, or you pass to, you know, whatever, sister or whoever. And that probably in that way went out the window, that direct one-to-one storytelling.
Yes, exactly. It's, I think, quite often in the groups of like baby toddler groups, we have all the focus on babies and toddlers. The stories are told, songs are sung to the babies and toddlers. But Connecting Stories project also gives space to the parents to reflect and tell their stories of this journey of becoming parents during this really interesting times, and that they were the only point probably of they were the ones who sang and told stories, entertained and played with the children. Plus Zoom, Zoom connection, online digital connection. Like my daughter, she knows the words like Zoom and Skype, and she's not 2 yet.
Yeah, it is incredible to think that certain children have grown up in their early years with this kind of slightly strange, detached world. So where is how can people see the show? Where is it going to be? And is it like a film showing? Is that the way it's going to work?
Yes, so people will see it in CCA. It's on Thursday. And at the beginning, we will start with a film, and then there will be probably a talk, a presentation about the project, and some Q&A. And we are hoping to see parents and the children from the project as well. And afterwards, we will have an amazing workshop by the star catchers, and they will lead a workshop of how to develop skills working with the early years group.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. And is this the first time it will be shown? Is this the first time it's been seen?
Yes,
Wow.
that's right. So the first day I said, so it's July, 7th of July, and I have to check the time now. It will be, 10:30 a.m., 7th of July in CCA.
Fantastic. Now, Shona, I was looking at your show, Beware of the Beasts, and it sounds right up my street. Can you give us a background on it?
Yeah, so this is a family show, and it's a sort of a traditional storytelling performance, which means it's not set, it's quite improvised, and it will be very participatory. But the idea is that, I don't know if you know this, Alistair, but a long time ago, the magical beasts roamed across Scotland. And but when the Industrial Revolution came around and humans started to be noisier and created more pollution, and it all became much smellier, the beasts, they went and hid in their homes, in the caves and the swamps, etc. And so during lockdown, when humans have been safely tucked inside, the beasts have come back. And so this isn't a performance, this is a safety warning show. And we kind of pretend that the stories are like case studies about how to avoid being squashed or turned into a nugget. So it's about monsters and the traditional stories and relating it to the lives of the children. But at the end of the day, it's actually about being kind and being conscientious about who we share the planet with and our impact on it. So it should be a lot of fun, and I hope it's a bit of a riot.
Great.
It's quite energetic.
We could all do with a riot. I think that sounds great. But it also taps into that thing of Scottish. Well, I felt reading the kind of synopsis of it, it tapped into that thing of Scottish myths and legends, and exactly that the creatures that you catch out the corner of your eye because they've taken aback. Yeah,
because these stories exist for a reason. Inside each of them is these creatures. They have information about how we related to the world around us. So, for example, dragons in our culture have are a way, a metaphor, a symbol for humans to process fear of the other, or a way for us to understand hoarding or wealth inequality. So these things have a purpose as well. So, and we all understand that because deep inside us, maybe not initially, but we've been using these symbols for so long that we understand what it means to, what a fairy might mean. In Glasgow, actually, fairies are really interesting in Irish and Celtic and Glaswegian culture. Fairies are often associated with infant mortality. Right. So it was a way to process the unthinkable. When you can't think about that thing that's happened, you can tell a fairy story, or you could tell stories about a changeling, which is the story in which a child is replaced by a fairy. So they have a social purpose, and I think it's really important we don't forget that. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds fantastic, and actually leads on to my next question, because you said earlier on, Emma, that this is part of Scotland's Year of Stories, which is happening, for the whole year. One, how important is this year? And I'll ask you all a just similar type of this question, but how important is this year? And do you think storytelling is often overlooked in the kind of modern world? Emma, I'll start with you, if that's okay.
I think that it's wonderful to see a year where stories are going to be celebrated across the whole year. And I think that Scottish culture is rich with stories, and so are the people living in Scotland who tell them. And of course, that's not just the people who are Scottish, for want of a better word, but the people who come to our country and bring with them their own stories and so on. So I think it's really important. Are stories overlooked? I don't know. I mean, perhaps in terms of a kind of festival, I think that people will not have been out to a storytelling show. They might never have realized that this is something that you can do, that this can be just as, exciting a night as going out to the theatre or whatever. But actually, yes, I think that it'll be really brilliant for this year to highlight that storytelling is just as entertaining an art form with all of these other aspects to it, I think, that Shona was talking about, as any other. So I think it's really, I think it's really great that the Year of Scotland Stories is happening.
Yeah, I mean, just what you're saying there about how perhaps nothing changes a culture or a society quicker than the different stories that come into it. So you meet new people, and one of the first things you probably do is share various stories, and that, goes on to the next stage and the next stage, and suddenly things have changed and attitudes have changed and all sorts of things. And I guess what was behind the question is, people often say that we don't talk to each other or communicate as much as we used to do. It's perhaps a stereotype, and that storytelling perhaps isn't as, particularly during a stage where we haven't seen each other as much as we did. It's not something that's as important as perhaps it should be, but maybe it has to be organic. Maybe it cannot be forced. Same to yourself, Raymond. What do you think about the kind of the year of Scotland's Year of Stories, but also, the importance of storytelling?
I mean, I think just like what we were saying, after a couple of years of not being able to tell those in-person stories, and also feeling as if there wasn't any story progression for 2 years, we sat in one room for that whole time, and so a lot of people feel as if they're a bit almost betrayed or something, because there's 2 years of their life where there maybe wasn't much going on. And so to actually have now something things to talk about again, and to actually then go, oh no, wait, I've got my own little story of the little journey that I went on while I was inside for 2 years. I mean, I know that my show, I Hope Your Flowers Bloom, it kind of comes from, it's like a direct, almost epilogue to 2 years of being inside and missing these connections, the theme of the festival being reconnection, and missing these connections and not really knowing how to deal with people, or only dealing with people digitally. And so when you make this sort of intense connection again, the character and the story takes that off the charts. It becomes so much more intense than what a connection might have been, and their connection to the outdoors has changed. Their connection to themselves has been intensified by only knowing themselves for 2 years. And so I think it's it's interesting now to hear everybody's little individual story of what you know, a lockdown or what a time that seems as if it was the same the whole time does to somebody. In terms of, you know, storytelling tradition and what it is nowadays, I mean, if you look at sort of the biggest parts of pop culture, so I mean, if you're talking about movies, the biggest films are these kind of sagas that be going on for 10 years, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, whatever. These are ongoing stories that people like, this sort of continuous story. If you talk about music, I mean, a lot of my influence when it comes to storytelling is hip hop, which is like the biggest form of music in the world, and kind of the modern era. And some of the best storytellers, my biggest influences are hip hop artists and rappers, and that's at the core of hip hop. So I think it's still there. And then if we're talking about how we talk to each other, you know, I think we obviously still communicate. What that looks like is different, but it's now a lot of the time just like almost code and, you know, emojis and memes and all these kind of things. But it's still such an intricate, specific way of communicating that there's still a lot of subtlety in. However, obviously all of that cannot be replacing just face-to-face telling a story about what has happened. That in itself is still needed without the spectacle and everything around it, which is so, I mean, for me, this transition is going into a storytelling show. It's so vulnerable. It feels so vulnerable to just go, okay, I'm going to tell you how I felt and what happened to me, rather than hiding behind a character when I've done acting before, or rather than writing a short story and that can just be published and I can kind of hide behind the words. It's just me on stage going, oh yeah, I did feel this, and this is what happened, and like, okay, this is what you might think of me, and I'm telling it to your face right now, and that's scary. That I find that really, right now, that's something that's quite terrifying, but also just like, you know, it's obviously quite thrilling, and it's obviously intimate. It's intimate.
Yeah, Shona, what you gonna?
Yeah, just as Raymond was saying, when we've all gone through a trauma together, collectively, this has happened to us. And when you're in the trauma, the story hasn't formed yet. We haven't created that narrative. We work a lot with people that have experienced complex traumas that are disenfranchised for many various reasons. But now we're coming out of it. Now is when the stories start to form and start to solidify, and we start to process and understand what's just happened to us, like Raymond's experiencing himself. And so I think that's why it's particularly resonant that this is the year of Scotland Stories, because now we need to talk. Now we need to start sharing the stories of what has happened. We couldn't have done that last year. Yeah, we're just opening ourselves up, like physically, social distance wise, but also our sort of our hearts and our minds.
Well, that's interesting. It's almost learning how to do it from the beginning, which is why Daiva's project sounds so interesting, because it's children are doing that. They've not had what's gone past. They're actually doing it from scratch in this slightly different world that we're all experiencing. So do you think that's right, David? Do you think the Scotland's Year of Stories has come at exactly the right time for all of us, including you know, children and toddlers who are you know, are learning for the first time?
Yes, I think so. It's a very good time to have to have focus on stories throughout every field in Scotland. And everyone from the newborn babies, but also to the children who are in nurseries and in schools, they had such a big trauma. You know, they were not able to go to the nurseries, to the schools, to see their friends. They were kind of playing on at home by themselves. And and I think professionals can see how it affected them mentally, psychologically, and also how it affected their language skills, their literacy skills. So it's very important to show and put this light on how stories and communication and this contact with people is important. I'm so happy that we have this focus.
And there is this aspect to telling any story that is slightly performative to some degree, to a greater or lesser degree, and that's something that whether you're telling a story in the pub or whether you're on stage, doing it, and that's something that people are maybe not been used to recently as well. And it's what Shona was saying about opening up again. There's that aspect of just standing face to face with a group of people and being comfortable enough to tell the story in the way you want to tell it.
Yeah, that's what we say in the Scottish storytelling community, that it's eye to eye and heart to heart. And that's it. You're making eye contact and you're connecting emotionally with people. And storytelling, as you were saying at the very beginning, and Emma was saying, it's so innate. It's such a human process that when you start telling stories, you're plugging directly into the human core emotions. You're not beating around the bush. You're not doing anything. You're going straight for love, or you're going straight for pride or joy or like heroism or whatever. So it's a very immediate, direct communication with what it means to be human, like eye to eye, heart to heart. But also what you were just saying there about it, one of the beautiful things about storytelling that no other art form can do is that it can be the highest quality performance in any location. And I really mean any location, and that's we work in hospital beds, or like beside hospital beds, and then in prisons and libraries and theatres, on buses, on boats. It can happen anywhere. We just need us and the audience's imagination, and an audience can be one person, and that's enough. And I said wrongly said in hospital beds. Obviously we don't do that, but during the pandemic, when I was working with people that had dementia or living with dementia, we usually, if they were going to come to one of our sessions, they'd have to arrange transport, they'd have to leave their homes, and that can be really stressful. Sure. But because of this online aspect, suddenly I could actually talk to them wherever they felt most comfortable. And sometimes that was in their jammies in their beds, and that's completely appropriate. And we'd get cuddled up, and I would be on my sofa with a cup of tea, and they'd be in their jammies in their beds, comfortable as anything. And we have this incredibly powerful exchange that would never have happened in that kind of level of connection if we'd been in a community hall in plastic chairs that they're not used to. So interestingly, it did open up some potential storytelling spaces having to move online that we definitely didn't anticipate.
I think there's a universality even to the term that will allow people to be comfortable with it, because we know what storytelling is. Everyone knows how to tell. Well, everyone has told a story and has heard the story and all of that thing. Whereas people might say, oh, poet, writer, theatre, actor, whatever it might be, they kind of go, oh, that's not me, that's not my thing. But as soon as you say, have you heard the story about, then immediately you've kind of gotten in there. But I also recognise what Raymond was saying about the kind of vulnerability when you're kind of putting your personal story out there. But I'm guessing the rewards you get from that are probably even greater, because whether they don't say it at the time, there'll be people that will be able to connect to something in your story, something that they'll take away from it.
Certainly hope so. It's with my story, the sort of thing that it explores a lot is masculinity, and the sort of original idea came from this notion of how men treat women and how men traditionally have treated the natural world overlaps somewhere. And so within my story, there is a lot of admittance of things I have done wrong as a man, and things that the way that I've treated people, or the way that I've viewed women, or the way that I've viewed the natural world even, has came from a place of, patriarchy, or a place of coming from a country that was a colonizer. And I think saying these things on stage to people, some people that I know that won't know these things about me, some people that I don't know that could make any judgment they wanted, is that the vulnerability in that is like you said, scary. And I'm so interested to see what people's reactions may be to the discussion of masculinity and going, okay, I know what I did was wrong, and now, like, this is where I'm at now, though, so where do we stand here, you know? And I think, again, that's, everybody has stories, nobody has been perfect, you know, so everybody kind of has these ups and downs, and that is the story, you know, the redemption and the going wrong at some point.
And I guess everyone's individual stories are constantly changing and constantly ongoing. Again, it's not a set text or a set script or whatever on the page. You know, you might do a similar show a week later and find that it's changed and developed. And Shona, you said your show is interactive, and you're working with the audience as well. So do you find every night it's a different night?
Yeah, every single time. There's a couple of stories I've been telling a lot, some really beautiful traditional Scottish traveller stories, and every single time I tell it, the audience tell me something new about it. And I know that sounds like unbelievable, but it's true. There's another layer that they reveal for me, which is, yeah, it's really amazing. I don't know if maybe at the end there's time for a very, very quick story.
Well, possibly. We'll see. As far as I'm concerned, there is. But Emma, what were you wanting to say something?
I was just thinking about how stories change as we tell them, and change when the context in which we're telling them changes. And it made me think about Daiva's show Wolf Girl, which is going to be on in the evening. And I'll let Daiva tell you more about it. But when it was first developed, it had a very different resonance to it has now, because of the way the world has changed since Daiva started to create the show. And I just thought that might be a really interesting thing for us to think about as well.
Daiva, could you tell us about Wolf Girl? That'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Emma, for mentioning that. So the Wolf Girl is very fragile story and very close to my heart, because it's a story about my aunt. So it's the main character is my aunt, but my grandmother and grandfather is in the story, and my great auntie is in the story. So it's kind of my family story. And the story is about what happens when the war is over, then what happens with people in certain areas. And it really, I started this project, just wanted to share as giving a voice to refugee children from East Prussia, a place that used to be part of Germany before Second World War, and now it's Russia, it's Kaliningrad. And the atrocities the people experience in that area are just really horrible. And I think every war has the same script probably, but no one was listening to the stories of these children, because they are the children of enemy, the children of German Nazis. And they are quite common stories that they are orphans, and they are just experiencing hunger. They don't have nothing to eat. It's freezing, it's winter. And the only solution is to flee, and to flee to neighboring countries. And one of those countries is my home country, Lithuania. So my aunt was one of those children, and these children have a special name. This name is Wolfskinder. It's in German, so that means wolf children. And it's a very strange name. Why would these children have such a name, wolf children? Because quite often they were just going through the woods like almost wild animals, looking for food. But also probably metaphorically, Germany had this image of a wolf, and these are the children of the kind of this unpleasant character from from the fairy tales. Quite often wolves are portrayed very negatively in fairy tales.
Mhm.
So, so this is a story how my aunt Ingrid Traum, when she was 11 years old, on her own, reached Kaunas, my hometown, and she thought she just went to get some bread and she will come back, but she never came back. She stayed in Lithuania. So story is about hope as well, because she found new home, she created new family, and people she met, they were also generous to her and they opened their door to her. So it's like now we see what's happening with refugees around Europe, probably, especially from Ukraine. People are open to Ukrainians, and I don't know, Poland, Lithuania, they really were so welcoming. I quite recently was in Lithuania, like Ukraine, flags of Ukraine is hanging everywhere. Scotland is the same. You can see how much effort people made into donating and welcoming refugees here. Unfortunately, the official politics is not so welcoming.
Mm.
So with the recent happenings, events in Ukraine, this story suddenly got totally a new relevance, if you may. When I created that story, I didn't want to show like that there is certain part is evil, like, you know, Russia is evil, Germany is also evil. It was not about that, but now it's hard to talk about Russia in a very positive way. I don't know. I just still want to say that people in their core, they are probably good, but this mechanism of war, this industry of war, probably can bring out the beasts. And so as a person, I'm very much with this story. I want to really focus on probably the hope and humanity side of us humans, and as well just to say that no matter if we are winners or losers in war, actually everyone is losing. The winners are losing too.
That sounds an incredibly powerful and poignant a thing to be doing. And are you doing this yourself? How are you doing the show, Wolf Girl?
So together with me, I have a singer, Agne Čapaitytė. She is a classical opera singer, and yes, we will. She will sing German songs, the ones that Ingrid's mother used to sing. So we are using kind of authentic songs. But also we will sing Russian songs and Lithuanian songs as well. And this is what I wanted to say, that even if in the story you can see that Russian soldiers were made really horrible things, but we actually are humans. They create beautiful lullabies.
Mm. I think that just proves the point that there is almost as many ways to tell different stories as there are stories themselves, you know, and that sounds like an amazing night. It actually brings me to the idea, apart from your own shows, are there other things that you're all looking forward to in the festival? Is there anything that's kind of jumped out at you that you think, yeah, I would love to see that? And I won't ask Emma this because she's looking after everyone and probably doesn't want to pick favourites, but Raymond, start with yourself.
I mean, for me, it's just sort of getting stuck in and meeting other storytellers, because relatively this is a new world for me. So, and I've always been a fan of storytelling, and I've done bits and pieces of it before. But to just be a part of a festival where there's going to be so many other storytellers there, including these guys, and just to be around that and to start talking to people about, okay, how do we make stories, and looking at them, and now being in the mindset of, oh, I'm a storyteller now. Okay, I can watch these things from a different angle and learn from them. I just feel it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting and invaluable to kind of this new whole side of my creativity that has been commissioned by the Village Storytelling Centre.
But I think that thing about being in a room again with people, and as you said, Shona, the eyes and the heart and connections and all of that is hugely important, because of course you can write stories on the page. You can probably even read them in audio versions and put them out as podcasts or whatever, but nothing kind of beats you being in the room, I think, with and saying to the person beside you, oh, what did you make of that? What did you, that kind of thing. And I guess as you guys, for performers, getting that immediate reaction from a group as well. Daiva, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to aside from your own shows?
Yes, I'm really looking forward for all the shows, and to see how other storytellers in Scotland doing at the moment. And at the moment, I was recently looking at the program and was thinking, could I be come to see the show from Adverse Camber? It's a wonderful show by. Oh, now I need to check the.
That's okay.
The program, all the names. Sorry.
It's The Gods Are All
Yes.
by Phil O'Coedy.
Yes, The Gods Are All Here, Phil O'Coedy. So this one is really looking forward to that. But also I'm looking forward to workshops, and all workshops seems to be great, like Thursday day about focusing on storytelling in conflicted world, and then we have storytelling and well-being, and we have storytelling and how to deal with loss and grief, and wonderful storytelling workshops from in partnership with Horus project. Probably it's the toolkit of applied storytelling, which is something I'm really looking forward. So I think it's a very rich program. To be honest, I would like to go to everything, but it's impossible.
Unfortunately, it pretty much is, but I think you're right. It's a very rich program. Shona, yourself, is there anything that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, loads of stuff. Daiva and I are both, well, I'm an associate staff member of the Village, and Daiva's a core staff member. So we're both run off our feet, to be honest. I'm doing 4 different events, which are completely different, from young people to early years children and people that are in a vulnerable situation, to a project that both Daiva and I are going to be performing in on the Friday evening. And it's called Women Who Give No Fs. And it's all about, it's 6 storytellers that sort of, they each present a woman that does care, but a great, incredible historic woman or a mythical woman, and we kind of, the women compete against each other. So I think I'm going to be doing a Mary Barber story. It's a 10-minute thing, so that's a really lively thing on the Friday night. But I'm also really looking forward to the Cailleach, which is Cailleach is an ancient creator deity of Scotland, which we can do a whole other podcast about her. She's amazing. But she was said to have created Scotland, and we've almost all but forgotten this figure, and she was so important. And there's I think it's Mull Theatre and Tobin somebody, yeah, and they're going to do a circus, like a circus performance reflecting on this mythical character. I'm really looking forward to that, but it's going to be great, everything.
And Emma, is there any information that we haven't given out that people should know about, or maybe you could remind us about the main details?
Yes, so the festival will be running from the 5th to the 10th of July. So it's in just over 3 weeks. We're going to open our doors. We're very, very excited. The main performances are all going to be at the CCA up in Sauchiehall Street. And there's also going to be an exhibition in Salt Space, which is on High Street, and there'll be a family day out in Pollock on the Sunday. The tickets are in a pay what you can scale, so there's a variety of different price points so that everybody can hopefully make it along to stuff. There's also quite a few free events, and you can get tickets on the Village Storytelling Centre's website. Do you want me to tell you the website?
Yeah, you could do that, but we'll put a link to it in the accompanying post. But if you can do that, if you know it off by heart.
There'll be a link in the accompanying post.
That's fine. No problem at all. We will make sure everything is linked to fully there, no bother.
And we just love to see as many people there as possible. It's going to be a really great few days.
Yeah, I mean, if you've listened to this or watched this, do go and check out the full programme, because you're bound to find something that you want to go and see. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to chat. It's been a really fascinating talk. And now I think Shona promised us a story before we finish. Was that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Oh, go on then.
Right, I think that would be a great way to finish. So thank you, before we do that, to Emma, to Daiva, to Raymond, and to Shona, who's about to give us a story.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been lovely to have this conversation with you, Alistair.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
So this is a very short story that I heard from an incredible storyteller called Claire Murphy Mitchell, and she's Irish, but when she told this story, in my head it was about Castle Milk. So that's what you can imagine. But Castle Milk back in the day, before there was sky rises, long before there was any buildings there, well, any big buildings, there was one little house, just one little house, and it was occupied by an older woman, and she had the most beautiful garden, and she would work there most days, and she really loved looking over the city of Glasgow, which at that point was much, much smaller. And she used to enjoy watching the people pass into the city and give her bits of news, and then come out maybe with something tasty for her to buy in exchange for some of her prize-winning tatties. It was a perfect location for her. And sometimes she could jump aboard a carriage and get a lift into town, or get a lift back out when it was sunset. So one day she's in her garden, and along comes a big stallion that's snorting out its nose, thundering along, approaching her. And on the stallion is a guy who says, "Woman, you woman, here, is that Glasgow ahead?" And she says, "Yes, sir, you found it." And he says, "So what's Glasgow like then? Tell me. And she says, "Well, first tell me, sir, what's the place like that you're from?" And he says, "The place I'm from is terrible. I tell you, it's terrible. The people are awful. They're mean. They moan to each other. The weather is awful. The buildings are ugly. Where I come from is terrible." And she says to the man, "Well, I think you'll find Glasgow is something like that." And the man with a huff turns on his heel and heads, "I'm away to Edinburgh," he says, as he gallops away. And not long after, she's cutting some herbs for her evening's potato salad. And another horse comes along, and this time it's a polite cough. "Excuse me, madam, excuse me, have I nearly reached Glasgow? Is that Glasgow ahead?" And she says, "Aye, it is, you're nearly there." And the person says, "Can you tell me, what is the city like?" And she says, "Well, first tell me, what's it like where you're from?" And the person on the horse says, "Oh, where I'm from is wonderful. Do you know what? It's wonderful. People can't do enough for you. Even though we don't have a lot, everything we have, we share. The weather is a bit rainy, but that's what makes things grow. And the buildings, they're so well kept." And she says to them, "Well, I think you'll find Glasgow something like that." "Thank you very much," says the person on the horse, and off they go into the city. And that's the end of that.
Thank you very much. What the perfect place to end. And we will be back soon with people completely different. Cheers.